Books and movies can always be disputed, but you can't dispute someone who was actually there.
I think the main thing that is important about this program in specific is that you're in direct contact with survivors.
The two mediums are not really the same. Interacting with someone and seeing their emotions and hearing their story face to face is not the same as watching a movie about them or going to a museum.
There isn't so much time left that we can do this. So I think that it's so important that we can have it, that I have a chance to speak to someone that was in the Holocaust.
I need to be able to say the facts, and even if they're not saying the facts, I need to be able to challenge accurately and be able to prove that this really did happen to a lot of people, and it was something that you can't forget about, and it can never happen again.
Once you've got the number, you were not allowed to use your name. So that was a terrible thing, because you were not anymore a person.
War stinks. War is hell.
Once you got the number, you were not allowed to use your name. So that was a terrible thing, because you were not anymore a person.
At MTA, the Names, Not Numbers Holocaust Memorial Project is in its 9th year. On the opening day, our Rosh Hashiva and head of school, Rabbi Talbis, and the creator of the project, Mrs. Rosenberg, described the importance of preserving oral history testimonies from Holocaust survivors on film.
1961, really 1960. Adolf Eichmann, who was the brains and the moving force of the final solution, was found by the Israelis in Argentina. He was kidnapped and he was brought back to Israel to stand trial. Gideon Hausner, who was the prosecutor, decided that would be the most important thing to do would be to bring 112 survivors who would come and tell their stories, would give their testimonies of what happened to them. This was the first time in 1961 that survivors began telling their stories.
The purpose of this program, as the title indicates, Names Not Numbers, is to convince you, to show you, and through you, other people, that there's not just numbers. 6 million is not just a number.
You're bringing the testimonies of the survivors to the whole world for everybody to see.
You guys, sitting in this room right now, are the last generation that will be able to speak to people who actually lived through it.
You were the link of what started in 1961.
We had 3 sessions on the history of the Holocaust, taught by Rabbi Richter, the coordinator of the project at YUHSB.
My son partook in this project, and he became very close with Mr. Goldberg. And Mr. Goldberg told him, there's one thing that I want to ask God when I get up to heaven. It's not why I went through it, but rather, why did these eyes have to see what they saw? I could handle the pain, but I'm not able to handle what I saw.
The sessions that Rabbi Richter gave us were very eye-opening, and some of the things that he taught us were things that I never saw before. And it really opened my eyes, which is what the project's all about.
We viewed the Academy Award-winning film, One Survivor Remembers, the oral history of Gerda Weissman-Klein. Journalist Jacqueline Rifkin taught a session on interviewing techniques to prepare us for our oral history interview.
One of the ways that you turn people back into people is with the details of their lives. I think that the part of the process that worries people most is asking the hard questions, and even the possibility that the survivor might cry. And unfortunately, there's no way around this. We're writing, you're interviewing them about deeply difficult, painful experiences. On the other hand, They're here because, in a sense, they want people to recognize who their family was, who the people they lost were, and how they've rebuilt their lives. So in a sense, you're going to find that, that they want to talk. You're doing something for them too. You need to be respectful, but you don't need to be apologist, because the truth of the matter is you're helping them preserve the histories of people they loved and cared about, and of a life that they lived that's gone. And that should be important to them and to you.
She spoke about having open-ended questions, not just us asking a closed-ended question and just getting facts, because that's not what it's all about. We went on a guided tour of the Museum of Jewish Heritage and had a seminar on ethical wills, led by Dr. Paul Rudensky, Rabbi Shimon Kerner, Rabbi Tani Cohen, and Rabbi Stephen Rechter. We were taught how to use a professional camera and the techniques for filming in oral history. Each group of students had a chance to practice with the equipment under our instructor's guidance.
Doing names, not numbers, because my grandparents were survivors, and although they're not living, I feel like connected to them by doing this. I feel it'll bring me closer to them, and obviously the person I'm interviewing too, but through this interview, I'll feel like I'm somewhat interviewing them too.
Interviewing my great-grandfather is a real privilege. Hearing everything that he has to say face to face, not sitting in a crowd, but being able to ask questions is an honor.
Well, Mr. Schicker is my grandfather, and I haven't really heard his story, but as I get older and as my grandfather gets older, he's starting to open up and tell more and more stories about it. So I think this would be a very unique opportunity to hear his full story about his experience.
I feel amazing that I get to make a movie about Holocaust and interviewing my great-grandfather.
After weeks of preparation, the big day came. We greeted our survivors, and for more than an hour, we interviewed and filmed their testimonies.
I prepared for my interview by doing research through different handouts given to us from teachers.
I prepared by looking up Dr. Avital online,
reading the bio and researching information about Mr. Steinmetz.
I prepared for the interview by reviewing the links that I was emailed.
We learned about life before the war. We learned about the horrific experiences they encountered, and we learned about their strength, how they survived.
I am nervous about doing the interview.
I'm slightly nervous. I don't want to make the survivor feel uncomfortable.
I'm very nervous about doing the interview. I'm nervous that I might make a mistake or unplug the sound by accident.
I am extremely nervous, and I don't want anything to go wrong.
I am a little nervous about filming.
I am a little nervous because people are going to tell us their story, and I'm scared to kind of see their reactions, how they're going to react to us asking them the questions about their life.
I am interviewing Shmuel Schicker.
Mr. Shmuel Schicker.
Dr. Avital. I am interviewing my grandmother, Dorothy Berman.
I am interviewing Mrs. Dorothy Berman.
I'm interviewing David Steinmetz.
Richard Wessler.
You're Mr. Miller.
I'm interviewing my great-grandfather, Eddie Rosenblum.
We are interviewing Dr. Moshe Avital.
I'm interviewing Rabbi J.J. Schachter.
I'm interviewing Mr. Miller.
I am interviewing David Boyne's great-grandfather.
I am interviewing Mr. Shmuel Schicker.
Celia Pincus.
We are interviewing Dr. Moshe Avital.
I am interviewing Richard Wessler.
I am interviewing Rav J.J. Schachter.
Good morning. My name is Yoni Schachter. Thank you for coming to be interviewed for our Names Not Numbers project. Please tell me your name.
David Steinmetz. I was born in Romania, September 12, 1926. We were 10 children. My family was in lumber business. My father, Olaf Schulen, was a Vision Chassid. My father conducted a real wonderful Shabbos. We had Zmiras. We had guests. My Zaidi was always in our house, and it was really a blessing.
My name is Moshe Avital. I was born in a town called Bilke in Czechoslovakia. I was born in July 18, 1928. We were 11 children, 6 brothers and 5 sisters. My father, Lava Shalom, was the shochet and cantor of the town.
My name is Mordechai.
Where were you born?
Poland Lodge, November 6, 26. We was a family of 8 kids. My father was in textile. Lodge was famous in textile. And the mother sold milk and Shabbos. My mother baked everything, challahs, cake, everything. Our backyard was a bakery. My mother was a Reiches Chai, and my father's brother was a Rosh Yeshiva. The yeshiva was based of Rome, and I was learning there till the war broke out.
My name is Celia Pinkas. I was born on November 23, 1917. 2,500 people lived in that town, Christians, most of them. Only 16 Jewish families who lived in town. In the family, I was the 9th. 3 brothers and 6 sisters. We had a general store. We had a lot of property. They respected us because everything they needed, they came to my father. If they needed to borrow money from a bank, my father signed, they got the money. They were our friends. We had no enemies in our town. We lived with them, we grew up with them. We had democracy. We had a king, King Carl. He was a good king. Jewish people had all the rights.
My name is Jack Joseph. I was born in a town called Mezela Borce in Slovakia, May 29, 1925. And we are 9 in the family, and I'm the youngest of 9. And my mother had died at a very young age. My father was a farmer. He had many professions. One of his professions was farming. The whole town was Jewish. There were non-Jews, only 2 non-Jews lived in that town. Most of the Jewish people were shoemakers, tailors, grocery stores, textile stores, and we had a regular Shabbos dinner. Everybody managed to have a chicken for Shabbos, even though most of the people were poor, and everybody worked very hard, and it was beautiful.
My name is Dorothy Berman. I was born in Katowice, or Katowice as they pronounce it in Polish, in Poland.
When were you born?
February 7th, 1937. My mother in Katowice had her own store, and it was a store to women's undergarments. My father was in the family business, which was lumber. My father was one of 12. My mother had a brother who died before the war, and she had a sister, an older sister, and it was a very busy Jewish type of town.
My name is Edmund Rosenblum. I was born in Vienna, Austria, July 27, 1920. In Vienna, there were no yeshivas. Once a week, our rabbi came in and sort of told us about Jewish holidays, Jewish customs, and so on. But the education in the Jewish idiom was not at great length. The relationship the Jews had until Hitler came in the late 20s and early 30s wasn't bad at all. Quite honestly, in the middle 30s, there was some isolated cases, but nothing too severe. My father was a tailor, and his customers were Gentiles and Jews alike. So Jews and Gentiles got along pretty well.
I was born in Poland. I was born in 1924. I came to the United States. The year was 1929, the year of the Great Depression. There was poverty at the lowest level. We were greeted by my father, who preceded us to come to America 2 years before the rest of the family joined him. We moved right into the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I was the only member of my family who finished high school. In those days, young men got through a couple of years in public school. After 5th grade, I think many of them left school and had to earn some money to help sustain the family life. That was life on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. That was life on the Lower...
Jay Schachter.
Thank you. You're here speaking in place of your father. What was his name?
My father's name was Rabbi Herschel Schachter. My father was born in 1917 in Brownsville in Brooklyn, New York. Our family comes from Galicia. His parents came to the United States. His father came in 1907. He was the youngest of 10 children. His father was a shochet. Our last name is Schachter. My grandfather was the last of 7 generations of shochtim. My father broke the chain after 7 generations. He attended school. He attended the Mesivta Chaim Berlin and the Mesivta Torah Vodaas, and then in 1934 came to study at Yeshiva College. And he had a very rich, full, happy, excited, authentically, profoundly Jewish upbringing.
Can you please describe what happened when World War II broke out with your father?
He was very much taken by it, very much upset by it, and instituted a series of events that culminated in him volunteering for the army and asking, actually demanding, to be shipped overseas to be able to serve in Europe to try to help the Jews. My father was very committed to try to help Jews.
In 1936, the fascists came to power. Jewish people, the government didn't look at us like they used to. They were starting to talk about you shouldn't buy Jewish people. They made you feel that we don't want you, we don't need it. And my neighbors started to say, go to Palestine, go to Palestine. We didn't realize what's waiting for us. Because in 1939, our area became Hungary, took us over. It was different entirely. When the Hungarians came in, they took some Jewish leaders away. One of them was my father. For 2 years, we didn't know where my father was. Finally, with protection, with money, he came home. He was not the same person no more.
Well, there were a number of times that the war broke out because first, Czechoslovakia was overrun by the Germans. The Germans decided to divide Czechoslovakia into 3 different entities. The biggest part they annexed to Germany. Slovakia became a separate fascist state, and the Carpathians, where I come from, the eastern part of Czechoslovakia, was given to the Hungarians because they were participating in the war. And the Jews, of course, were worrying right away what will happen because we heard all kinds of stories. Soon after that, all my brothers, 18 and over, 3 of them, were taken by the Hungarians, what they called Munko Tabor, which is labor battalions, forced labor battalions. They organized them like in army units, and they shipped them to the Ukraine to help the Germans in the war effort. When we were taken, we were first in a ghetto, in Ghetto Berehovo. You were locked up. You were guarded all the time by Hungarian police and soldiers. There was no food. People were dying because there was no medical care. There was no sewerage. There was no running water. It was a terrible thing. We were told that we are going to be taken to a secure place, which of course was a great lie. We were taken to the train station and we were pushed into boxcars. We didn't know where they are taking us.
The war started in 1939. The German walked into our city. Lodge, the city lodge was a big city. Part of the city was very rich people, and a part of the city was very poor city. They take out the other rich people to the poor, and they locked it up in the ghetto. Everybody in the ghetto have to work. Little kids, big kids. My little brother was sick in the ghetto. And he was very sick, no treatment. He died. It was a very hard winter. My father and mother took my little brother, 9 years old, to the cemetery. But they cannot dig the cave. And this brought my father to become sick. My father was a young man, and he died in the ghetto.
Germany gave Maramuresh, part of Romania, to Hungary because the Hungarians were allies of the Germans. And that was our misery, because we had no problem with the Romanians. The Romanian people were nice. The Hungarians were miserable. It was Pesach, the last day of Pesach. My sister and I, my both parents were dead already. We came home from shul. We found the gendarmes, the Hungarian gendarmes, by the door waiting for us to tell us tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, they will come to take us away. So they came the next morning and they took us to the ghetto. After 2 weeks, they took us to a train.
We were not deported by the Germans. We were deported by the Slovakian government. It was the only country in Europe that the country sold the Jews to the Germans. They paid 500 marks for every Jew to be deported with a guarantee from the Germans that they will not come back. When the news came out that they're going to take for work between 16 and 45 boys and girls, my father said, this is not good. We better pack up and run away. Fortunately, we had one sister that was married, and she lived in a part of Czechoslovakia that was turned over to Hungary in 1939. My father decided that we will try to escape to Hungary.
When the war broke out, my mother, father, myself, and my grandfather, my mother's father, got a car which they tried to go to Russia with. They felt that they would be safer in Russia. They knew that the Germans were rounding up Jews. And at that time, there had been already other communities where the Germans killed Jews, but they were turned back and they ended up in Krakow. And that's where the Krakow ghetto was built. It was extremely crowded. People did not have enough food, of course. They also many times took children that they could that they didn't want in the ghetto, because what good were they? They couldn't work. And unfortunately, they killed many children this way. My mother had a slightly older sister who had a child around the same age as myself, and that child was caught and never heard from.
All over Europe, they burned and they plundered all the synagogues. As soon as there was any activity going on, word went around, get lost, get into hiding, because there's going to be pickups. And they picked up Jews off the street for no reason at all. No, for no reason at all. They were always accused of planning against the government, planning against the Hitler, that you were some sort of a subversive group. And they picked you up, put you into various camps, and then you wound up in concentration camps, or Dachau, or Buchenwald, or Mauthausen. They were galore. I was mostly in hiding, but we were fortunate in a way because my relatives who came to the United States in the mid-20s, they did quite well. And when Hitler came in and all that developed, they said, naturally, we have to get everybody out.
I knew we were at war. I knew the tide was turning. We already had soldiers in Africa. More than that, I probably didn't know too much about what was happening in Europe. I joined the Army, not joined, I was drafted into the Army, indoctrinated in Camp Upton until they found where they wanted to send me. I suppose the feeling would have been it was a war that was necessary that we got into. I didn't like it at all. I felt terrible. I felt terrible because it was going to take me away from my home life. They needed me at home to help support a family, even though I wasn't married. It just wasn't pleasant. They sent me to New Orleans, Louisiana. I have no idea how I got to New Orleans, whether I got there by train or truck or bus or whatever. They had an Army base there, and they were going to teach me how to operate trains, to be an engineer of a train. They put a uniform on you, and after that, you're a different person.
He went to chaplain school, and when he became a chaplain, wandered around first the southern part of the United States, and then in the Caribbean, and then insisted that he be sent overseas. This was a mission for him. He obviously had no idea how it would turn out. Right. He just knew that Jews were in trouble.
Where was he stationed when he joined the Army?
I don't remember which cities in the South. I know it was in the southern part of the United States. I know that he was in Greenland, and I know he was in Curacao, and then shipped over. He was part of George Patton's Third Army. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and then made his way across to Germany and to Buchenwald, which was the final stop for his Army career.
In 1944, before Pesach, was a decree with the Gestapos. The Gestapos came into our town. After Pesach, we have to leave the town. So they took us away to a town called Bishop, in a ghetto. We had our own home, we were comfortable and everything, but could you imagine to put you in 10, 15 people in one room? My Zadie was with us too. My Zadie was 96 years old. But we didn't have the food for him. He couldn't tolerate it. He died here. He was the last Jewish person to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. We were in ghetto for 3 weeks, and then they announced there was 3 transportations out of the ghetto.
The journey took 5 days. After the first day, people were dying from hunger because we took something along with us, but we didn't have much food.
It wasn't pleasant. We were like closed in. In a corner in the cab where we were, there was a barrel. If you had to go, you went there.
There was no place to sit down. There was no place, no toilets, nothing for all these people.
People were put in like sardines, and here people were dying, and here people had to go and relieve themselves. So what kind of a chaos it was.
It was not a regular train, it was for animals, for transportation.
That's it. You were not allowed to look out the windows in the train.
Just a little window on top, it was it.
It was very, very high. They stood on the shoulders of somebody. When the train stopped, they looked out to see at what station we are. They saw a name, Krakow, so we knew that we are now in Poland. The next day, the train stopped and they looked out again and they see a name that nobody ever heard before.
Auschwitz.
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 One by one, to Dr. Mengele.
I had a brother named Motaria. He says, I'm not going to let Tati go alone.
At that time, we didn't know what it meant, left or right.
When I got there, I had to undress up to the waist. I had to turn around back and forth. He examined my back to see if I'm healthy.
And I don't know why, I was a small boy. And I went to the right side.
The two brothers, we took on this side too. My father and mother, they put on this side.
I was 40 years old, and when I stood in front of Mengele, he hesitated for a moment what to do with me.
Now my sister came. They examined her. Unfortunately, she had a few pimples on her back. Because of those pimples, Dr. Mengele had to examine her longer. Now I thought I'm dying. I was so scared that they won't let her come with me. What will I do without her?
And then finally he sent me to the right, where he sent before me my brother.
Finally, they let her come.
But sadly enough, my father was sent to the left.
The same night they were gassed. The last thing I saw my family.
We were heading towards the Hungarian border, but it was not as simple. My father had other ideas, that we do not go together, the whole family. In the meantime, in the synagogue, the whole town was talking that my father is making a panic in town. It's not that serious. My brother and my sister went, and the taxi was supposed to come back for me and two other girls. So when the taxi came back, that taxi was stopped. They arrested us on Friday night. We were brought Saturday morning before a judge, but the two girls were local girls. They were talking and they knew the judge, so they let us go. So I decided I'd go back to the house, stay with my father. The second time I tried, when the news came out that they take old people and women and children. My father had an acquaintance, a friend. He was head of the foreign currency department. It was illegal to hold foreign currencies. So he went with two more detectives. He went to our town, and he had to go to the police and tell them that he wants to arrest my father, because he knows that my father is holding foreign currencies. And he went to the house, but that was all prearranged, that this is going to happen. I think 3 weeks we were in jail. While we were in jail, most of the Jews from our town and from other cities were deported. He made arrangements for us to cross to Hungary.
When the Krakow ghetto was closed, they liquidated the ghetto, but they kept a small group of people to work for them. My father, he convinced the Germans that he was a tailor. So he spent his time ironing uniforms. My mother, she managed to get herself a Singer sewing machine and made these, quote, undergarments for the fat Germans and Polish people who were the wives of the higher up Germans or Poles who were working with the Germans. When they knew they were liquidating the ghetto, of course, everyone was rushing around. My father from the shop called my mother to say, I have a truck with a group of other people that are going to be working. I told them that you and your, quote, assistant are coming to work. Now, when we arrived, of course, I was not an assistant, and my father told me he really got beat up by this German, and he called him liar and worse words. But my father answered him that your wife told my wife that as long as you're in charge, my child will be okay. And that's how I survived getting into this shop.
Things went from bad to worse, but meanwhile, I got my passport, I got my papers. The Hayas, which is a wonderful organization, they did all the arrangement for the ships. And late in September, not already in December, the tickets came through. We went to Switzerland. We stopped off for a few days in Zurich. From there we went to Cherbourg, the southern part of France. We got aboard ship. The name of the ship was the Aquitania. February 3rd, the Friday morning that the ship landed on 82nd Street on the west side, we all were told to come aboard and look at the Statue of Liberty, and everybody had tears in their eyes. It was a very eventful day. My Aunt Sally and my Uncle George were at the boat, and big welcome, and we were happy to be in the United States.
In my infantry company, we had just two Jews, myself and one other chap from Brooklyn. We were picked on to do the dirtiest chores available that a soldier had to do. Each infantry squad had a group of soldiers carrying a particular weapon, but they had only one spot open for someone who carried a Browning automatic rifle. This Browning automatic rifle weighed about 23 pounds, as against a rifle which may have weighed between 9 and 11 pounds. You probably had more automatic riflemen killed than any other group of infantrymen. I became concerned for more reasons than one. I was a skinny kid, I weighed 110 pounds. They took me out to a firing range to see if I can qualify. And being a smart kid from the east side, I said, well, here's a way to beat them. I took my automatic rifle. Instead of shooting at a target, I aimed it up at the sky and kept shooting into the sky. My sergeant was standing next to me with a chart. Bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. According to him, I shot more bullseyes than any other soldier ever did. The next day, they have a big ceremony and they pin a medal on me as a sharpshooter with the Browning automatic rifle. They were determined that I keep that particular rifle. That's where I got my first feeling of discrimination in the service.
He insisted on being transferred to Europe, and he was transferred to Europe in the early part of 1945. When he first came to Europe, he was behind the lines of the American Army. His job was to help American servicemen, primarily Jews, and there were many Jews, but not only Jews. He told us often about how soldiers of all religious faith communities would come for counseling. These were difficult times. Friends were dying. Friends were being killed. People were getting injured. And they needed solace and they needed help. He would write letters to families of soldiers and was very busy as a chaplain servicing the soldiers of the American Army in the months.
I was in Auschwitz for 3 weeks. He sent us away to a town called Gleina. in Germany. Over there was factories which they used to make from coal, gasoline. In Gleina, I got sick. I got an infection. They put me in a clinic. In the clinic, they hardly give you anything to eat. Just a little bit of water, soup or something, nothing at all. So my brother used to come to see me. He used to go over the side where the Germans were, on the garbage cans. One day, they caught him. They lined up all of us outside, and they would beat him so bad they damaged his kidneys. They said the people in the clinic have to get out. The ones which could walk could get out, because they're leaving Gleina. We had some Russian prisoners there too, and they used to listen to the ground, and he said the Russians must be close because they heard the noise from the tank from the bottom, something like that. I didn't feel like going. My brother comes running to me. He said, "Double, get up right now. You gotta come with me." I got up and I went with him. We heard a big explosion. They blew up the whole clinic. Anybody there was killed.
Buchenwald was a very, very large camp. It had 80,000 prisoners just 2 weeks before liberation. In Buchenwald, there was a children's barrack. There was a wonderful, wonderful man in charge over the barrack, a non-Jew. He was a principal of a public school in Czechoslovakia before the war, and he was sent to Buchenwald because he was anti-German. So he was trying to watch out for the boys in his barrack. He couldn't do much, but whatever he did, he did. Like, for instance, he arranged that the boys will not go out and work in the quarries or in the factories where you had to work very hard. There were all kinds of rumors that the Americans are coming, that the Russians are coming. Nobody knew exactly what was happening.
And I come in to Birkenau. Birkenau is a part of Auschwitz. Over there is the private German came in and they pick people for work. I was with my brother, my older brother. Him, they pick. Me, they don't want to pick. I was too small. He don't want to go. They didn't take you, I'm not going. If they took people for work, they can't, as they can't the people. And I took a chance. And I had over there 2 cousins. The 2 cousins were standing by me, and they picked me up. I should be bigger, and they can't. And I was counting this because the little boys, they had a chance to go to the right side in the selection. Later on, they took them all to the crematorium. What kind of work they gave me? I worked in a kitchen in the SS. My brother we was together all the time.
Many of the girls were taken to factories to make ammunition. We were luckier. They took us to work for the German, for the Wehrmacht. They put us in a kitchen, a lot of vegetables to clean. 1 o'clock every day, the Wehrmacht military came to have lunch. What was left from them, left over, they gave us to eat. So we had food. But to clean the vegetables, I had to go to the bathroom. They didn't have toilet paper, they had newspapers. Since my Yiddish is close to the German, I knew what I was reading. I found an article in the newspaper that the Germans attacked Russia and the Russians beat them. I was so happy. The first thing I showed it to our leader. She read that, and then she read it loud for everybody to hear. Everybody started dancing, and jumping. We were dancing and we were singing. Outside in each corner they were on top, soldiers with rifles. They started yelling, Ruhe, Ruhe, ich will schießen, ich will schießen. Nobody listened to them. We were singing, we were dancing. A few days later, we had to march. So after 3 days and 3 nights that we walked, we arrived in a prisoner's camp. And there we stayed until we were liberated. That's where we were liberated.
They took us in on the Hungarian side. After we got to Satmar, we were there for 2 years in Hungary. In 1944, when they started taking the Hungarian Jews, my oldest brother and my father decided that we are going to escape from Hungary back to Slovakia. We crossed the border. From there, I met Chesky Lando. So he suggested that I go to Nitra. His wife was in Nitra. He said, I'm going to give you a letter to my wife, and she'll show you around. It's called the Vatican, the Nitra. We have a yeshiva there, and this is a safe place. So, of course, my brother was trying to arrange phony Gentile papers for me and for him. And it didn't take long, and 2-3 days later we had the papers, and I went to Nitra. I've never been there before, and I was very happy there because the food was good, plenty of food. They were davening, they were learning. After a few days, a young man comes over, he says, I'm in charge of the yeshiva here. I didn't even ask him his name. He said, I hear that you have Gentile papers. I said, yes. Well, this is not a place for you. You can't stay here. I felt very, very hurt. So I said, I'm going to talk to the Nitra Rebbe. So I went into the Nitra Rebbe, and the first thing he asked me, do you really have papers? I said, yeah. He said, if you have papers, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. This is not a place for you. This is not a safe place. We make people believe it's safe. We bribe the officials. But how long are we going to bribe them? Nobody knows. You're better off on the outside. I say to him, I have daven every day. I have kosher. It makes like this. It's not a time for davening. It's not a time for kosher. This is a time for every Jew that could save his life, must save his life. So I told him, if this is the case, give me a brucha. He said, you can do everything. Don't worry about Shabbos and don't worry about treif. Don't worry about davening. The only thing you must never do, you must not deny that you are a Jew. So I said, I can't understand that. I'm going to live as a Gentile. I shouldn't say that. He says, you mustn't say. He says, maybe they're not going to ask you. And if they ask you, maybe you'll have another answer. And I left. That was it.
I grew up under a bed, in a box, or hidden. After the ghetto was liquidated and after the shop closed down and the Germans had to run, they put us on a cattle car traveling to a concentration camp. The name of that camp was Gross Rosen. My mother was put on a line with women, and she had decided in her mind that they were going to fool the German by telling him that I was a midget and that I could count, I could do this, I could do that, and I would be able to work wherever my mother went to work. Somewhere in the yard where we were separated, there was a cat. And your grandmother, being a child, got down on her hands and knees and started following the cat. Still can't believe, it happened, but it happened. I followed the cat. My mother realized there's no way she's going to tell them I'm a midget because I'm actually a child. And some kind of a miracle happened. This German, for 1 minute, was able to have some kind of heart And let me go with my mother.
1941, and you know, you all know what happened in 1941, Pearl Harbor. I wanted to go overseas because I had a little thing to settle, so I was anxious to go. The invasion of Normandy Beach was in 1944, June 6th, 1944. I was there in the second or the third wave, late in July. We were in the barge, and our captain said, "Look, I want you guys to relax. There's only two things that can happen to you. If you get wounded, the war's over. Hospital, nurses, you get shipped back home. If you get killed, the war's over. Nothing to worry about. You go home in a box." One of my arms came out. I had a torn rotator cuff. My arm totally left the rest of my body, and they were going to send me back. They says, "Wait a minute. Before you send me back, I speak German. I could be of help. I could be an interpreter." And they said, "That's a good idea, because what we need, we have a couple of guys who speak Yiddish, and the prisoners don't understand Yiddish." And as they brought in the prisoners, I got up and I said to him, "Ich bin ein Jude und Sie müssen mir die Wahrheit sagen, sonst werden Sie sehr bestraft." "Sie sind ein Jude?" Meaning, I'm Jewish, and I'm going to ask you questions. So you better tell me the truth, otherwise you'll be severely punished. According to the Geneva Convention, all you have to do is name, rank, and serial number. If you were taken prisoner, the Americans, that's all they had to do. Name, rank, and serial number. That's all you have to say. But they went beyond that. Beyond that, because for them the war was over. So they're very cooperative.
Being a sniper, I was more on my own. And I made the determination, if I was going to get killed in combat, I'd rather be killed based on my own decision rather than having someone tell me to do something and then getting killed because of it. And that's how I went overseas with my division. The entire 103rd Infantry Division went over in a convoy to Europe.
As a Jew, can you describe what it felt like to be fighting for your fellow Jews in Europe?
Yes, I would say I was very proud to be fighting as a Jew, because when I went over, I knew I had an enemy called the Germans. Not only German soldiers, but the German people. It was quite simple. The war I was in, I knew who my enemy was. My division, the 103rd Infantry Division, was chosen or given the honor to replace the best division ever in the U.S. Army, called the 3rd Infantry Division. They came up through Africa, through Italy. These were seasoned veterans. And seeing these veterans going back to rest areas as we're moving forward, it kind of left you with the impression, what am I getting into? You see young men, dirty faces, wet clothing. You just didn't like it. As you get closer and closer, you start seeing bodies. Some of them younger than me, Germans. And in my mind, I kept saying, that could be me tomorrow. You just don't know.
On April 11th, 1945, he was in the frontline troops with Patton's army when they came into the camp. Nobody expected what they were going to see. He was simply overwhelmed with shock and with sadness. He came into the camp, and there were two things that he saw that struck him. First of all, were the piles of dead bodies strewn around, and then the incredulous look on the faces of the survivors, who simply could not assimilate the fact that they were now free.
you.